In Vietnam, the war wasn't only fought in the jungle. Sometimes it was decided in the sky. Picture the night. A jet slices overhead like a razor. Flares burst into white fire, and a radar sweep turns darkness into moving symbols and sudden warnings. For many aircrews, the battlefield was not a hilltop or a tree line, but a narrow corridor of air where weather, fuel, and seconds could decide everything. One light on the panel, one tone in the headset, and a choice that cannot be taken back. From 1965 to 1968 to 1972, American air power became one of the war's central instruments. The mission set was huge in ambition: disrupt the routes that sustained the fight, protect bases and cities, support troops on the ground when they were pinned down and out of time, and apply pressure that leaders believed could shape decisions far from the battlefield, right up to the negotiating table. In theory, control of the air could compress time, reduce casualties, and force outcomes. But Vietnam would test the limits of that promise again and again. You can see the air war in three contrasting images. First, a fighter punching through cloud layers at full speed, steel and fire disappearing into gray. Second, inside the cockpit, a pilot's eyes locked on instruments as a warning spikes. The threat unseen but suddenly close, and the only response is training, instinct, and tight teamwork. And third, far below, a unit trapped in heat and dust, calling for help while the line between friend and enemy is dangerously thin, because when support arrives late, the bill is paid on the ground. So the question is simple, and it matters. If the United States often controlled the skies, why didn't air power end the war sooner? What did it achieve? Tactically, strategically, politically? And where did it fall short against terrain, adaptation, and an enemy that learned to survive under the shadow of aircraft? In the next 20 minutes, we'll break it down clearly. The doctrine behind air power, the major air campaigns, the rise of air defenses, and the reality of air combat, the high-stakes world of close air support, the 1972 turning point when air power reached its peak, and the legacy that changed how America would fight from the sky ever after. To understand why air power became such a central plan in Vietnam, you have to start with the map, and with the problem of seeing the war at all. Indochina is a landscape built for concealment. Thick jungle canopies, broken mountain lines, river networks, and long stretches of weather that can erase visibility in minutes. Supply routes don't run like clean highways. They bend through valleys, vanish into tree cover, reappear at night, and move across borders where politics complicates pursuit. On the ground, that environment makes the enemy difficult to find, difficult to fix in place, and difficult to measure. And that is exactly why the sky mattered. If you can't reliably see the battlefield from a patrol trail, you try to see it from above. American strategic thinking in the early 1960s treated air power as a multi-purpose lever. It could deter by signaling overwhelming reach. It could strike infrastructure, bridges, depots, transportation nodes, to slow the flow of men and material. It could interdict supply routes and protect friendly positions. And it could give infantry a decisive advantage when contact happened, because air support could arrive with force that foot soldiers could never carry. But beneath all of that was a deeper assumption, that air power could shape behavior. The war's goals were not only military, they were political, about stability, legitimacy, and will. Air campaigns, in theory, could apply pressure until decision-makers changed course, not just until a target was destroyed. From 1961 to 1964, the air role steadily expanded. Aircraft were used for reconnaissance, watching roads, rivers, and movement patterns from above. They carried supplies and moved personnel through terrain, where ground travel could take days and invite ambush. They supported advisors and South Vietnamese forces with mobility, surveillance, and limited strike capacity. The rhythm of flights increased as the conflict intensified, and with each increase came a subtle shift in responsibility. What began as support, helping someone else fight, started to become a central instrument in how the United States managed the war's tempo, protected its presence, and tried to control outcomes across a large and complex battlefield. But as the air war's importance grew, so did the danger in the sky. Air defenses expanded and adapted. Radar coverage improved. Anti-aircraft guns multiplied around key corridors and targets. Surface-to-air missiles introduced a new kind of threat: fast, invisible, and lethal at distance. Intercepting fighters added yet another risk, turning some missions into contests of timing, altitude, and sudden reaction. This meant that air superiority wasn't free. It had to be earned on every mission. Every sortie became a calculation. Weather, fuel, route, threat levels, rescue plans, and the reality that not every aircraft would return. And this is where the mismatch begins to form. The setup for the major campaigns that follow. Air power could destroy targets. It could punish, disrupt, and protect. It could save troops on the ground in moments where seconds mattered. But it could not automatically deliver the political outcome the war demanded. A bridge can be rebuilt. A supply route can reroute. A pressure campaign can harden resolve instead of breaking it. And a war fought among villages, borders, and competing claims of legitimacy cannot be settled by bombs alone. That tension between what air power can do and what leaders wanted it to accomplish sets the stage for the next chapter, when the air war expands dramatically and its limits become impossible to ignore. By 1965, the air war moves from an instrument in the background to a campaign at the center of strategy. The United States begins large-scale, sustained bombing designed to do more than destroy targets. It is meant to apply pressure, disrupt supply and movement, and force a change in calculations. The logic is clear. If key routes and facilities can be struck repeatedly, the enemy's ability to fight in the south will shrink, and the political cost of continuing the war will rise. In that moment, the sky becomes a front line. But almost immediately, the air war collides with a hard reality. Defense adapts faster than plans. Routes are dispersed. Supplies are broken into smaller loads. Movement shifts toward night and bad weather. Camouflage becomes an entire system. Nets, decoys, concealed storage, fast repair crews, and discipline under pressure. Targets that look decisive from a briefing map can be rebuilt, bypassed, or replaced. Bomb damage is real, but strategic result is not automatic. The war in Vietnam is not a machine that stops when a single gear is broken. It is a network, and networks reroute. At the same time, the sky itself becomes more dangerous. Missions are flown through corridors watched by radar and defended by layered threats. Crews learn that the most frightening enemy is not always the one they can see. A warning tone, a spike on the scope, a sudden call over the radio. These are the moments that tighten the throat. Pilots and crews work under constant pressure to stay focused, to trust their instruments, and to trust each other. Formation discipline matters. Timing matters. One aircraft makes a move and another adjusts. Every sortie becomes a chess move under pressure because one mistake can turn a flight path into a trap. This is also a war of learning. New tactics emerge, not as theories, but as answers to near misses and losses. Squadrons refine how they enter and exit defended areas. They practice coordination between aircraft types and roles. They build habits around rescue planning, because survival does not end when an aircraft goes down. And across these missions, the psychological burden grows. The understanding that courage is not a single heroic act, but a repeated choice to go back up into contested air again and again, with no guarantee of control. Yet the most immediate, emotional role of air power is not strategic pressure. It is the moment when soldiers on the ground are in trouble and time is collapsing. Close air support becomes a lifeline. A unit pinned down behind a berm, a patrol trapped by fire, a base under attack. These are situations where seconds matter, where an aircraft overhead can change the odds instantly. But close air support is also where the limits of air power are most visible. Weather can shut the sky. Smoke can hide the target. The jungle can make distance look deceptive, and the line between friend and enemy can blur in a heartbeat. Pilots and ground controllers must coordinate with precision, because a mistake here is not an abstract error. It is measured in lives. Air power can be devastating and life-saving, but it is never effortless. It depends on visibility, communication, and an accurate understanding of what is happening below. By 1967, the United States is flying massive numbers of missions, and leaders speak of progress. Yet the core dilemma remains. Air power can inflict tremendous damage, but the war's political gravity still pulls toward uncertainty. Then, 1968 forces a shift. The conflict produces a shock that changes the national question. The debate moves from "how do we win fast" to "how do we end?" The war is no longer only a contest of strength overseas. It becomes a crisis of confidence, purpose, and credibility at home. Air operations continue, but their meaning changes. They are no longer only tools of pressure and support. They become instruments within a wider political struggle over time and endurance. Negotiations begin, and air power becomes part of leverage. One more way to signal resolve, to shape incentives, and to influence the pace of decision-making. But leverage is not control. Bombing can create pain, disrupt movement, and raise costs, yet it cannot by itself guarantee the political agreement leaders want. Every action in the air now sits inside a larger equation: domestic opinion, allied stability, and the enemy's willingness to absorb punishment for strategic gain. As the war moves into the early 1970s, the United States adopts Vietnamization, reducing American ground presence and shifting the burden of combat to South Vietnamese forces while maintaining strong support from the air. In this phase, air power becomes even more central in day-to-day outcomes. Aircraft move supplies and troops. Reconnaissance watches roads and patterns. Strikes are used to blunt attacks and protect positions. For many operations, air mobility and surveillance act as the glue holding together a strategy built around fewer American soldiers in the field. Fewer boots on the ground means more weight on the sky. But the map also widens. Operations and pressure extend into neighboring areas as commanders seek to disrupt sanctuaries and supply routes that feed the war. The logic is consistent. If a conflict is sustained by movement and hidden infrastructure, then interdicting that movement becomes essential. Yet the consequences are complex. The war's geography collides with politics, borders, and public reaction. Debates intensify inside the United States. Trust continues to erode. And despite heavy effort, supply networks prove resilient. They bend, they repair, they adapt. A route is cut in one place and reappears in another. Interdiction becomes a relentless contest between detection and concealment, between strike and repair, between pressure and persistence. Then comes 1972, the moment when air power reaches a peak and the war turns again. A major offensive escalates the urgency, and the response relies heavily on air operations. The tempo intensifies. Missions stack up day after day. The focus sharpens toward strategic targets and battlefield pressure designed to change the situation quickly. Air defenses remain severe, making every flight a test of planning and survival. But the scale and coordination improve, and the effect becomes harder to ignore. This isn't just support, this is decisive pressure. In this period, air campaigns become more concentrated and more integrated with strategic aims. The emphasis shifts toward focused target sets, tighter coordination, and a clearer linkage between military pressure and diplomatic movement. Again, the point is not the technical details of aircraft or munitions, it is the logic of the campaign. Air power is used to disrupt key systems, to raise the cost of continued fighting, and to shape the conditions of negotiation. For the United States, it becomes a way to exert strong influence without returning massive ground forces. For the enemy, it becomes a stress test of endurance. How long can the system absorb strikes, and what must be conceded or delayed to survive? By the end of this arc, one conclusion stands out. Air power in Vietnam was not simply a supporting tool, and it was not a magic solution. It was a powerful instrument, capable of saving lives, shifting battles, applying pressure, and changing momentum. But it was also constrained by terrain, weather, adaptation, politics, and the limits of what destruction alone can achieve. As the war moves toward its final phase, the legacy of these campaigns becomes clearer. Vietnam forced air power to evolve, forced strategy to confront political reality, and left lessons written not only in reports and statistics, but in the lived experience of every mission flown into contested skies. So what did air power ultimately change in the Vietnam War? First, in military and political terms, it proved both its power and its limits. Air power could deliver pressure at scale, disrupt movement, protect key bases, and rescue units in crisis when minutes, or seconds, meant survival. It could shift momentum and raise costs, and at times it became the sharpest instrument available. But Vietnam also showed that air power alone cannot manufacture a political end state. If the foundation on the ground, security, governance, legitimacy, and control, remains unstable, then even intense air campaigns cannot guarantee a lasting outcome. Second, the air war left a deep social imprint. For air crews, it meant mission after mission into contested skies, carrying the weight of decisions that could not be undone. For soldiers on the ground, it meant dependence on support that might arrive through cloud, smoke, and confusion, or might not. And for civilians, it meant living under the constant uncertainty of a war that could move from distant to immediate without warning. Long after the final sorties, memory stayed. The legacy of Vietnam is not only in statistics and summaries, but in the human aftermath, homecoming, trauma, silence, and the lives rebuilt in the shadow of experience. Third, Vietnam reshaped the geopolitical use of American air power for decades to come. It forced planners to think harder about objectives, limits, and conditions for success, about what airstrikes can achieve and what they cannot. It pushed new emphasis on clearer target selection, better coordination, and tighter links between military action and political purpose. The war became a reference point whenever leaders considered intervention from the sky. Not only can we strike, but what does striking actually solve? And the lessons remain clear. Political aims must match military means. If the goal is political stability, then strategy has to address political reality, not only enemy targets. Media and public trust are part of the battlefield. In Vietnam, credibility could rise or collapse with what people saw, what leaders claimed, and what the war seemed to become over time. And technology has limits, especially in difficult terrain and asymmetric warfare, where an enemy can adapt, hide, reroute, and survive in ways that sheer destructive power cannot fully prevent. But at the center of all these lessons is something simpler: people. the pilot who climbed into the cockpit again, the ground troops who listened for engines overhead, the families who waited, and the civilians who endured. Vietnam's air war was a contest of strategy, but it was also a chain of human moments, each one carrying consequences. Next episode, we'll zoom into one specific air campaign, or one high-stakes close air support mission, and rebuild it hour by hour, with maps and a radio-style timeline. What was known, what was assumed, and what changed in real time. Subscribe for the full Vietnam War documentary series, and we'll keep tracing this history, one case file at a time.